What's going on, everybody? This is the drop for Friday, July 24th. Thank you for joining. We have a brand new Osiris podcast to tell you about that debuts today. It's called Late Era. We've mentioned it before, but I'm going to tell you about episode 1. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the show. And then at the end of this intro, I'm going to play about 10 minutes of episode 1. So Late Era was an idea brought to us by 3 writers who are also musicians: Sam Sadomsky, who writes for Pitchfork; Andy Cush, who writes for Pitchfork and plays with Garcia Peoples; and Winston Cook Wilson, also writing for Pitchfork. And these guys had an idea to closely examine the underappreciated and overlooked records from some of the most notable artists of the past 60 years. So they were talking about, let's look into Miles Davis's hip hop phase and Joni Mitchell's synth experiment and things like that. And it's a really cool idea, so we decided to bring it to you all. So episode 1 comes out today, and we're really psyched to present it to you. These guys all do a great job of exploring these artists and their kind of artistic left turns, and they look at the albums and say, tell us what they think there is still there to appreciate about these mostly odd albums. So episode 1 is about the 2003 Neil Young and Crazy Horse release called Greendale. So this is a Bush era 10-song rock opera set in a fictional seaside California town. So it's a weird one, and it's kind of the perfect album to kick off this series. I really enjoyed listening to it. I think you all will too. Like I said, I'm going to include about the first 10 minutes after this, and then if you could and would, please subscribe, listen to episode 1, and check out what these guys are doing. It's really cool, and we're really proud to have them as part of the Osiris family. Real quick, before we get to episode 1 of Late Era, I also want to tell you that former U.S. Senator Harry Reid was a guest on Politics of Truth. So Bob Crawford is joined by Bob Costa of the Washington Post, and they welcome former U.S. Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. Of course, Harry Reid served in the Senate for more than 30 years and did a lot of good, I think, in my opinion, and probably in a lot of people's opinions. So they talk about the legacy of John Lewis, who just passed away this summer of protests against racial injustice, seeing Elvis perform in Vegas. They talk about the Grateful Dead, and they talk about the Democrats' chances of retaking the Senate in November. So pretty cool that Bob got to talk to Harry Reid. So check out that episode. The link is in the show notes. All right, let's get into Late Era episode 1. We're going to play a snippet here. Please click on the link in the show notes to subscribe and support Late Era. And thanks to the Late Era guys for doing this. We'll see you all next week on Monday, and we have a lot more content coming. So have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey everybody. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Late Era. It's a new podcast brought to you by Osiris Media. And on this podcast, we are going to be digging into the weird, wild, fascinating late careers of all sorts of classic artists from across genres. These people have albums you know and love. And at some point, maybe you stopped following along with what they were making, but they kept on doing their thing. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, sometimes it was hilarious. All of it we think is worth talking about. So that's what we're going to be doing on this podcast. I'm Andy Cush.
I'm Winston Cook Wilson.
And I'm Sam Sadomsky.
Season 1. It's cool to have actual seasons.
Yes.
As opposed to our other famous podcast.
Right. And if you've heard of us, it's possible that you are familiar with our extremely famous, controversial, what I like to call the world's most popular podcast about the band Chicago, Welcome to Chicago, where we examine the discography of the popular rock band with horns, Chicago, album by album. If you're a Welcome to Chicago fan, thank you for coming with us to Late Era. And if you're not, maybe you should check that out too.
If you're not,
who out
what's
there
wrong
with
doesn't
you?
know about
Yeah.
it?
One of the reasons that we started this podcast, and one of the things that we have bonded over, the three of us as friends, is a shared interest and shared interest in this sort of music that no one wants to really listen to or think about or talk about, and yet is just out there available for our listening. both because in the case of these late career artists, we think that it can be like really revealing and fun, and is sometimes artistically worthwhile. And then also on a more philosophical level, now that we have access to streaming, it's just sort of bizarre that there's all this like kind of almost cultural detritus or something that's floating out there. But because of Spotify and YouTube and so on, like all that stuff is just as available to us as like, a Rolling Stones record is. And it can be a strange experience wading through it. And we're just kind of trying to do that in real time with you guys, our listeners. And the first record that we're going to be talking about is called Greendale by Neil Young and Crazy Horse.
Greendale.
To me, Neil Young is like the ultimate artist to talk about this with. His catalog is so weird and has so much personality and has lasted so long and kept up such momentum.
When the red light shines on the streets of hate, where the devil dies.
Winston has come up with sort of a harebrained idea for us to help you guys get to know us, which is that each of us is going to introduce the other one, and then do that again. And Winston, since you're the one who sort of drove us into this disaster, I think you have to go first.
Well, first of all, have you heard of a team building exercise? Sam, have you heard of it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were asking rhetorically.
No,
Yeah,
I was
I've heard of
asking
it.
mostly you, Sam. Yeah, it's obviously we have over a year and a half of podcasting experience together, so we know each other pretty well, but I still think we could recenter ourselves because the tone of this podcast will be a bit different. Obviously, we're covering a variety of music, some of which is significantly more listenable than Chicago. In fact, most of it, if not all of it, which doesn't explain why I wanted to do this, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, where are you going with this?
I want people to really know what we're about before we get into this.
All right, so make your introductions.
Damn, I didn't rehearse this to be a little harder than I. Okay, so Andy Cush is a writer and editor. We worked together at Spin for a couple years. He's now a freelance writer and editor and also a contributing editor at Pitchfork. He's a Baltimore boy. Like me, he studied... Well, actually, that's a spoiler from my bio, but he studied...
Wow.
Yeah, fuck. That's what I say. That's what I do when I'm frustrated.
Take two.
He studied composition and ethnomusicology in school and has been an active musician as well as a writer through the years. He's still active in a band called Garcia Peoples, playing bass. He writes his own songs. He's a great reporter as well as a critic. And you know what else Andy is a great guy.
That was great. I feel honored.
I guess we're going to do it in
You're gonna do
order
me now?
like this. Is that the best way to do
I mean,
it?
this is fascinating stuff, I'm sure, for people who don't know us at all.
Sam Sadomsky is a writer at Pitchfork and just excellent music critic, a good friend for years, who also is an active musician, recording as The Bird Calls, BCI, and under various pseudonyms over the years. He is an insane Bruce Springsteen fan since a young age, growing up in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Definitely.
He went to school to study music-related things, but then kind of got more into writing, moved to the Big Apple, got more into writing, went to school for that, and then got a job at Pitchfork where he fucking became one of the big names in the album review game. He's beloved by every single person who knows him.
That's true.
Sweet.
He's a perfect co-host for this podcast because he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the discographies of the artists that he loves. I would say that's a big part of how you approach music. Is completism.
This makes me want to cry.
Yeah, well,
I've never heard anyone speak so highly of me while I was in the room. I think I'm starting to see the effects of this team building exercise. I'm really enjoying it more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I feel more like a team already.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on.
Another 30 minutes.
We're going to really bring this thing home. We're going to keep doing it. So Winston and I met while we were both writers at Spin, like you said. He, these days, is mostly a musician. He leads an amazing band called Office Culture and also writes his own music under the name Winston CW. He loves Grady's Cold Brew. He lives in Brooklyn. He's from Pittsburgh. I saw him the other day at a safe distance from each other.
It's true.
And he's turned me on to probably more great music than any other person I have met in my life.
Whoa.
So I appreciate that a lot.
Damn. That's amazing.
And now I have to introduce Sam again.
I don't think we all need to introduce each other.
Go fucking through it.
Okay.
What else can I say about Sam beyond Winston's lovely introduction of him?
You didn't say that I'm Jewish.
More
Wow,
muscular
yeah,
than
true.
you might expect. Sam is a little more jacked than you might expect if you just are familiar with him as a writer.
That's true, for sure.